Hi guys, so we're on the last video for adding and subtracting with common denominators. Here we go. So this is an addition problem, as you can see. So here we go. We've got v plus 8 all over v squared plus 5v minus 24. So now we need a factor. The top doesn't need to be factored, so that is just v plus 8 all over. Give me two numbers that multiply to be negative 24 and add to be 5. Well, I'm pretty sure that's going to be 8 and 3 multiplied to be 24. And since this is negative 24 and a positive 5, the 8 needs to be positive, so the 3 would be negative. So I've got v plus 8 and v minus 3. So I've got a v plus 8 in the numerator and a v plus 8 in the denominator. So what does that make the numerator? Well, I made a 1, so that means I have a 1 in the numerator over v minus 3. And there is your answer. Good job, you guys. So here we go. Next problem. Okay. So again, we're doing addition here. So I've got 5k plus 20 all over k squared plus 7k plus 12. So it looks like I'm going to have to factor both the numerator and the denominator this time. So it goes both into 5 and 20. Well, 5 goes into 5k k times, and 5 goes into 20 4 times. And then I need two numbers that multiply to be 12, add to be 7, 3 and 4, good. So that is k plus 3 times k plus 4. Awesome. So in both the numerator and the denominator, I have a k plus 4. So that leaves me with 5 over k plus 3. Good job, you guys. And girls, sorry. Next problem's number 15 here. And we have got a subtraction problem this time. Awesome. Okay. So that gives me 2r squared minus 4r all over r squared minus 12r plus 20. So I can factor the top. And what can I factor out of the top? Well, what goes both into 2 and 4? Well, 2 does, so I know I can take a 2 out. And what goes into r squared and r? Well, r. So if I take a 2r out of 2r squared, I get left with an r. And if I take a 2r out of 4r, I get left with 2. Okay, great. And then I need two numbers that multiply to be 20 and add to be negative 12. Well, what multiplies to be 20? 4 and 5, that doesn't need to add to be 12. How about 2 and 10? That multiplies to be 20, but doesn't add to be negative 10. So I think it's going to be negative 2 and negative 10. So I've got r minus 2 and r minus 10. So r minus 10, 2, and r minus 2. Woo, doing good today, you guys. So that leaves me with a 2r in the numerator and an r minus 10 in the denominator. And there's my answer. Good job. Okay. Oops. Whew. Let's go to number 16 here. And again, number 16 is a subtraction problem. Okay. So I've got 4n minus n minus 2 all over 3n squared minus n minus 2. So if I distribute this, right, the negative sign, I get 4n minus n. Well, let me just write this out. So it's 4n minus n plus 2 all over 3n squared minus n minus 2. So that gives me 3n plus 2 all over 3n squared minus n minus 2. Okay, so now I need to try and factor the bottom. My numerator have a 3n plus 2, cannot factor anything out of that. So in my denominator, I know that there's only two numbers that multiply to be 3, and that is 3 and 1. So I know I'm going to have a 3n and an n. Okay, so kind of like what we've been going along, I'm pretty sure, we're going to come over here to check, I'm pretty sure that it's going to be 3n plus 2. And then what times 2? 2 times what number gives me negative 2? Well, negative 1. So let's multiply this out and make sure this is right. So 3n times n is 3n squared. And 3n times negative 1 is negative 3. And n times 2, oh, 3n, sorry. And 2 times n is 2n. And 2 times negative 1 is negative 2. So that gives me 3n squared minus n minus 2. So that is correct. So that gives me 3n plus 2 and minus 1. So I have a 3n plus 2 in the numerator and the denominator. And it gives me a 1 in my numerator because I made a 1. I made a 1. The same thing on the top, same thing on the bottom makes a 1. So that means I have a 1 over n minus 1. And there's my answer. Good job. Okay. Oh no, we're getting a little bit harder. They made it a little bit harder this time. Why did they make it a little bit harder? Well, I have an addition problem and a subtraction problem. They want me to do two things at one time. Oh no, I'm not sure I can do this. Oh, we can do this, you guys. It's gonna be easy. We can do this. So I'm gonna write it out. I've got x squared plus 1 plus 5x minus 2x plus 11. All over x squared minus 4. So we're going to write it out one more time. So I've got x squared with everything multiplied out. So I've got x squared plus 1. I don't know where I got the n at. Let me fix that there. And that should be an x. Look, I finally get to write x's and I can't write them at all. So I've got 5x minus 2x minus 11 because that negative goes to both terms. Good. All over x squared minus 4. Awesome. So now in my numerator, let's combine my like terms and write it in the correct order. So I've got x equals x squared, and then my x's come next. So I've got, so that took care of that. 5x minus 2x is 3x. So that took care of my x's. Then I have 1 minus 11. So that should be negative 10 all over x squared minus 4. And then we're going to factor this. So give me two numbers that multiply to be negative 10 and add to be 3. Well, that should be 2 and 5. And because this is negative and this is positive, the 5 is going to be positive and the 2 will be negative. So that gives me x minus 2 times x plus 5. And then for my denominator, I need two numbers that multiply to be negative 4 and add to be 0. 2 and negative 2. Very good. So I've got x plus 2 and x minus 2. So do I have a 1 there? Well, yeah, I've got an x minus 2 and an x minus 2. That makes a 1 because I have 1 in the top and 1 in the bottom. And then what's left is x plus 5 over x plus 2. Beautiful. Okay. Nice job. See, it wasn't too bad. We just break it down, make it easy. Step by step. Long, not hard. Okay? So here we go again. A little easier. We only have two terms. That makes it better. So I've got a subtract problem again, or minus. So let's go over here, and I've got 4d squared minus 28d all over 6d cubed minus 42d squared. Awesome. Okay, so now we're going to factor. Let's do the top first. So what can I factor out of 4d squared and 28d? Well, 4 goes into 4 and 28, so I'm pretty sure I can factor out a 4. And then I have a d in both of them, so I can factor out a d. So if I take 4d out of 4d squared, I get left with d. And if I take a 4d out of 28d, I get left with 7. Okay, Now we're going to do the denominator, and I have 6d cubed and 42d squared. So what goes into 6 and 42? I'm pretty sure 6 does. And what goes, and I have a d cubed and a d squared, so the most amount of d's I can take out is d squared. So if I take a 6d squared out of 6d cubed, I get 1d left. And if I take a 6d squared out of 42, I'm pretty sure I get a 7 left again. So that would be d minus 7. So now I'm going to simplify. So what goes into 4 and 6? Well, 2. 2 goes into 4 2 times, and into 6 3 times. And then I have 1d on top and 2 on bottom. And then I've got a d minus 7 and a d minus 7. Those all make 1s. So what do I have left in my equation? Well, in my numerator, I have a 2 left. And in my denominator, I have a 3d left. And there's my answer, 2 divided by 3d. Good job, you guys. 2 more problems, and we're done. You guys are doing great. Okay. All right. So this is a subtraction problem. So I've got 2g squared minus g minus 15 all over 4g squared minus 25. Okay, so let's talk about this problem. Well, I know the top is going to factor into this. And the only thing that multiplies by 2 is 2 and 1. So I know I'm going to have a 2g and a g. And then 15, let's see if we can do the bottom. So I know I'm going to have a 2g for sure. I'm just going to say, I'm pretty sure I'm going to have a 2g. This we talked about a long time ago. And it's perfect square because the square root of 4 is 2 and the square root of 25 is 5. Remember when we're going what multiplies to be negative 25 and adds to be 0 is 5 and negative 5? So for the second half, it'd be negative 5 and 5. But I also need to make it be equal to 4g squared. So that's going to be 2g and 2g. Because I need a 0 in between. So it can't be 4 and 1. I wouldn't get a 0 in there. If you want to check, we can always check. How do we check? Well, we do 2g plus 5 times 2g minus 5, right? And we multiply it out, and I get 4g squared minus 10g plus 10g minus 25. And that gives me 4g squared minus 25. So I've got minus 5 and plus 5. And I like this. Why I like factoring for sure is I can always check my answer to see if I'm going to get the right answer. I can always multiply out what I've decided that it factors to see if I've got what I started with. Okay? So now we're going to factor the top part here, this part right here. And I know that from the only thing that multiplies b2 is 2g and g. So I know one of them has got to be a 5. Because to get 15, I've got to do 5 and 3. The question is it going to be plus 3 or is it going to be minus 3? And that's what we have to figure out. So we're going to try and figure it out is what we're going to do. And this is how I'm going to do it. I'm going to take 2g and 5 and multiply it by, I should have got a different color, sorry, 2g and 5 and multiply it by g and 3, and then we're going to put the signs in when we know what it's going to be. So I know 2g times g is 2g squared, and 2g times 3 is 6g, and 5 times g is 5g, and 5 times 3 is 15. So this middle number is the one that we're concerned about. I need it to be a negative g. This answer has to be a negative g. Okay? So does that mean the 6 is negative or the 5 is negative? Well, that means the 6 has to be negative. So what did I multiply to get the negative? Well, 2 times 3, so that's going to be negative 3, positive 5. So I've got positive 5 and negative 3. That gives me my, when I multiply this out, that gives me 2g squared minus g minus 15 right there. That's the only possible way it can give me the right answer. So then I get g minus 3 over 2g minus 5. And there's your answer right there. Okay, good job, you guys. We've got one more problem to do, and then you're going to be done with this lesson. And you can do the homework. I think there's only one homework for the one Delta Math for this, for adding and subtracting. Some of you may have a Kahoot to work on, try and outdo each other on adding and subtracting, just so you guys can think about outdoing each other in that. Just want to throw that out there. So I've got a minus sign, and we're subtracting. So I've got 5w minus 3w plus 1 all over 2w squared plus w minus 1. And that's going to be 5w minus 3w minus 1 all over 2w squared plus w minus 1. So then we get 5w minus 3w is 2w minus 1 all over 2w squared plus w minus 1. So now we have to factor, and we're going to factor the bottom. So I've got 2w minus 1 all over. So what two numbers multiply to be 2? Well, 2w and w. And what two numbers multiply to be 1? Well, 1 and 1. And again, now we have to decide if it's going to be, which one of the one's going to be plus and which one's going to be minus. So I'm going to come over here and do the same thing that I just got done doing. 2w and 1. I don't know what the signs are going to be yet. And w and 1. And I multiply it out. So 2w times w is 2w squared, and 2w times 1 is 2w, and 1 times w is w, and 1 times 1 is 1. So I want this middle term, I want it to be 2w squared plus w minus 1. So these two, when I add them together, have to be positive w. That means this w has to be a minus. So that means this one has to be a minus, because negative 1 times w would give me negative w. Okay, so I've got minus 1 plus 1. So I'm making a 1 right here. There's my 1. So my answer is 1 over w plus 1. Good job, you guys. Okay, so go ahead and finish working on finish your homework, whether it be in the Nearpod or a worksheet or whatever it is that you have for homework. You're doing the same thing, just in different formats. And then we will see you on the next lesson, which is adding and subtracting with different bases. So we will see you soon. Have a great day.